This is AC Doyle with another episode of Twilight Thriller Radio. Tonight, we have a tale of a blackmailer most vile, a crime that could only be solved by more crime, and a victim taking justice into their own hands. Wow, right? And who is bringing us this dangerous tale, thrillers? Half of your favorite detective team, according to our most recent poll. Yes, two.
That's quite a pun.
Recognize that voice? Half of the internationally famous crime stopping duo? The one without masks and capes?
Actually, there were masks involved in this case.
Ooh, intriguing. Well, let's welcome Dr. John Watson, about to bring us what might be a spicier tale of the adventures of Sherlock Holmes.
Well, I dare say we shouldn't tempt the thriller's baser instincts so much. There are reputations to be protected, as you might guess from the crime at its center.
Blackmail.
Yes, blackmail.
Well, you didn't share a lot of details in our initial chat.
I had to confirm a few things, but I can safely say now, years after the incident, that the principal person involved is beyond the reach of human law, so I can tell the tale in a fashion that will injure no one. It was an absolutely unique experience in the careers of both Sherlock Holmes and myself. We had been out for one of our evening rambles, Holmes and I, and had returned about 6 o'clock on a cold, frosty winter's evening. As Holmes turned up the lamp, the light fell on a card on the table. He glanced at it, and then, with an ejaculation of disgust, threw it on the floor. I picked it up and read, Charles Augustus Milverton, Appledore Towers, Hampstead, Agent. Who is he?
The worst man in London. Is anything on the back of the card?
Will call at 6:30. Cam.
He's about due. Do you feel a creeping, shrinking sensation, Watson, when you stand before the serpents in the zoo and see the slithery, gliding, venomous creatures with their deadly eyes and wicked, flattened faces? Well, that's how Milverton impresses me. I've had to do with 50 murderers in my career, but the worst of them never gave me the repulsion which I have for this fellow. But yet I can't get out of doing business with him. Indeed, he's here at my invitation.
But who is he?
I'll tell you, Watson. He's the king of all the blackmailers. Heaven help the man, and still more the woman, whose secret and reputation come into the power of Milverton. With a smiling face and a heart of marble, he must squeeze and squeeze until he has drained them dry. The fellow is a genius in his way, and would have made his mark in some more savory trade. His method is as follows. He allows it to be known that he is prepared to pay a very high sum for letters which compromise people of wealth or position. He receives these wares not only from treacherous valets or maids, but frequently from genteel ruffians who have gained the confidence and affection of trusting women. He deals with no miserly hand. I happen to know he paid £6,000 to a footman for a note 2 lines in length, and that the ruin of a noble family was the result. Everything which is in the market goes to Milverton, the cunning devil. He will hold a card back for years in order to play it at the moment when the stake is best worth winning. I have said he is the worst man in London, and I would ask you, how could one compare the ruffian who in hot blood bludgeons his mate with this man who methodically and at his leisure tortures the soul and wrings the nerves in order to add to his already swollen money bags?
But surely the fellow must be within the grasp of the law.
Technically, no doubt, but practically not. What would it profit a woman, for example, to get him a few months' imprisonment if her own ruin must immediately follow? His victims dare not hit back. If ever he blackmailed an innocent person, then indeed we should have him. But he is as cunning as the evil one. No, we must find other ways to fight him.
And why is he here?
Because an illustrious client has placed her piteous case in my hands. It is the Lady Eva Brackwell, The most beautiful debutante of last season. She is to be married in a fortnight to the Earl of Dovercourt. This fiend has several imprudent letters. Imprudent, Watson, nothing worse, which were written to an impecunious young squire in the country. They would suffice to break off the match. Milverton will send the letters to the Earl, unless a large sum of money is paid to him. I have been commissioned to meet him, and to make the best terms I can.
Well, Sherlock sounds like he's in an impossible position to consider paying off a blackmailer.
Indeed. Myself, I wanted to know what this reprehensible example of the man's basest instinct looked like, AC. And when he entered the room, at first, I saw a man like many others, 50, with a large intellectual head, a round, plump, hairless face, a perpetual frozen smile, and two keen grey eyes, which gleamed brightly from behind broad, gold-rimmed glasses. There was something almost benevolent in his appearance, until you caught the insecurity, the insincerity of the fixed smile, and the hard glitter of those restless and penetrating eyes.
Sounds like a real operator.
Not a face you want to fall under the scrutiny of. Charming enough at first acquaintance, his voice was as smooth and suave as his countenance, as he advanced with a plump little hand extended, murmuring his regret for having missed us at his first visit. Holmes disregarded the outstretched hand and looked at him with a face of granite. Milverton's smile broadened. He shrugged his shoulders, removed his overcoat, folded it with great deliberation over the back of a chair, and then took a seat. Then his attention turned to me.
This gentleman, is it discreet? Is it right?
Dr. Watson is my friend and partner.
Very good, Mr. Holmes. It is only in your client's interests that I protested. The matter is so very delicate.
Dr. Watson has already heard of it.
Then we can proceed to business. You say that you are acting for Lady Eva. Has she empowered you to accept my terms?
What are your terms?
£500,000.
And the alternative?
Oh, my dear sir, it is painful for me to discuss it, but if the money is not paid by the 14th, there certainly will be no marriage on the 18th.
You appear to me to be taking matters too much for granted. I am, of course, familiar with the contents of these letters. My client will certainly do what I may advise. I shall counsel her to tell her future husband the whole story and to trust to his generosity.
You evidently do not know the Earl.
What harm is there in the letters?
Oh, they are sprightly, very sprightly. The lady was a charming correspondent. I can assure you that the Earl of Dovercourt would fail to appreciate them. However, since you think otherwise, we will let it rest at that. It is purely a matter of business. If you think that is in the best interests of your clients, this letter should be placed in the hands of the Earl, then you would indeed be foolish to pay so large a sum of money to regain them.
Wait a little. You go too fast. We would certainly make every effort to avoid scandal in so delicate a matter.
I was sure that you would see it in that light.
At the same time, Lady Eva is not a wealthy woman. I assure you that £100,000 would be a drain upon her resources, and that sum you name is utterly beyond her power. I beg, therefore, that you moderate your demands and that you'll return the letters at the price I indicate, which is, I assure you, the highest that you can get.
I am aware that what you say is true about the lady's resources. At the same time, you must admit that the occasion of a lady's marriage is a very suitable time for her friends and relatives to make some little effort upon her behalf. They may hesitate as to an acceptable wedding present. Let me assure them that this little bundle of letters would give them more joy than all the candelabra and butter dishes in London.
It is impossible.
Dear me, dear me, how unfortunate. I cannot help thinking that ladies are ill-advised in not making an effort. Look at this. That belongs to, well, perhaps it is hardly fair to tell the name until tomorrow morning, but at that time it will be in the hands of the lady's husband, and all because she will not find a beggarly sum that she could get by turning her diamonds into paste. It is such a pity. Now, you remember the sudden end of the engagement between the Honourable Miss Miles and Colonel Dorking? Only 2 days before the wedding, there was a paragraph in the Morning Post to say that it was all off. And why? It was almost incredible, but the absurd sum of £75,000 would have settled the whole question. Is it not pitiful? And here I find you, a man of sense, boggling about terms when your client's future and honour are at stake. You surprise me, Mr. Holmes.
What I say is true. The money cannot be found. Surely it is better for you to take the substantial sum which I offer than to ruin this woman's career, which can profit you in no way.
Oh, there you make a mistake, Mr. Holmes. An exposure would profit me indirectly to a considerable extent. I have 8 or 10 similar cases maturing. If it was circulated among them that I had made a severe example of the Lady Eva, I should find all of them much more open to reason. You see my point?
Get behind him, Watson. Don't let him out. Now, sir, let us see that.
Mr. Holmes! Mr. Holmes! I have been expecting you to do something original. This has been done so often, and what good has ever come from it? I assure you that I am armed to the teeth, and I am perfectly prepared to use my weapons, knowing that the law will support me. Besides, your supposition that I would bring the letters here in a notebook is entirely mistaken. I would do nothing so foolish. And now, gentlemen, I have 1 or 2 little interviews this evening, and it is a long drive to Hampstead.
Well, that attack seems a surprisingly bold move for our friend Sherlock.
A desperate move, born of frustration, and one that proved unsuccessful when Milverton revealed he had prepared for all reactions. I have never seen a man so smug. When Milverton forced us back, I must admit my blood was up, and I wanted to deliver some consequences to our visitor. I picked up a chair, but Holmes shook his head, and I laid it down again. With a bow, a smile, and a twinkle, Milverton was out of the room, and in a few moments after we heard the slam of the carriage door and the rattle of the wheels as he drove away.
You've always been such a man of action, Doctor, to be so helpless.
It was miscalculation, vanity on both our parts, and a selfish wish to solve the problem with our own hands make us hasty. We too, Holmes and I, had become victims of Milverton's almost inhuman calm. The plan he'd coldly calculated, all the angles before stepping into our rooms. When he did not have the law on his side, he had the expectations of society. Holmes was expertly trapped between the sharp jaws of a well-tested trap. So he sat, motionless, by the fire, contemplating his next move, his hands buried deep in his trouser pockets, his chin sunk upon his breast, his eyes fixed upon the glowing embers. For half an hour he was silent and still.
Beast mode.
More Rodin's statue than anything stalking prey. But then, with the gesture of a man who has taken his decision, he sprang to his feet and passed into his bedroom. A little later, a rakish young workman with a goatee beard and a swagger lit his clay pipe at the lamp before descending into the street. "I'll be back sometime, Watson," said he, and vanished into the night. I understood that he had opened his campaign against Charles Augustus Milverton, but little I dreamed the strange shape which that campaign was destined to take.
And now is an excellent time, thrillers, to take a break for this week's crime poll. When you put on a disguise to evade pursuers or investigate wrongdoers, do you go barefaced or add a mustache to your look? Vote at TwilightThrillerRadio.com. And we're back, thrillers, here with Dr. John Watson, who's about to tell us exactly what steps Sherlock Holmes was preparing to take on London's most notorious blackmailer.
Well, first, Sherlock announced his engagement to a young woman.
Pardon but what the futon?
Exactly. And yet, the next time we discussed this case, Sherlock was getting married.
You would not call me a marrying man, Watson?
No, indeed.
You'll be interested to hear that I am engaged.
My dear fellow, I congratulate you.
Milverton's housemaid.
Good heavens, Holmes!
I wanted information, Watson.
Surely you have gone too far.
It was a most necessary step. I am a plumber with a rising business, Escott by name. I have walked out with her each evening, and I have talked with her. Good heavens, those talks. However, I've got all I wanted. I know Milverton's house as I know the palm of my hand.
But the girl, Holmes.
You can't help it, my dear Watson. You must play your cards as best you can when such a stake is on the table. However, I rejoice to say that I have a hated rival who will certainly cut me out the instant that my back is turned.
Well, that's a very fast bit of sidestepping responsibility. You can't help it.
I can assure you the only thrill Sherlock gained from the relationship was architectural knowledge.
Well, I imagine Sherlock Holmes' version of flirtatious banter with a housemaid involves best practices for removing bloodstains.
You can't help imagining such things, AC. And he wasn't Sherlock Holmes, investigator. He was Escott, plumber on the rise. That night, Holmes was excited, eager for a plan he had yet to explain the details of.
A splendid night it is.
You like this weather?
Suits my purpose. Watson, I mean to burgle Milverton's house tonight.
What? The futon?
If you keep interrupting, AC, your thrillers will not hear the end of the story this year.
Okay, but Sherlock Holmes, the man the police turn to, I'm supposed to believe he's going to commit burglary. Surely you must have been as shocked as I am here?
Shocked, perhaps, but not at Sherlock's plan. It was all suddenly clear. As he announced his plan, I caught my breath, my skin going cold at the words which were uttered in a tone of concentrated resolution. As a flash of lightning in the night shows up an instant of every detail of a wide landscape, so at one glance I seemed to see every possible result of such an action. The detection, the capture, an honoured career ending in an irreparable failure and disgrace, my friend himself lying at the mercy of the odious Milverton. For heaven's sake, Holmes, think what you are doing.
My dear fellow, I have given it every consideration. I am never hasty in my actions, nor would I adopt so energetic and indeed so dangerous a course if any other were possible.
But to commit such a crime when you have put others in
My
jail for
dear
less.
Watson, let us look at the matter clearly and fairly. Surely you admit that the action is morally justifiable, though technically criminal. To burgle his house is no more than to forcibly take his pocketbook, an action in which you were prepared to aid me.
Yes, it is morally justifiable, so long as our object is to take no articles save those which are used for an illegal purpose.
Exactly. Since it is morally justifiable, I have only to consider the question of personal risk. Surely a gentleman should not lay much stress upon this when a lady is in most desperate need of his help.
You will be placing yourself in jeopardy, an indefensible position.
Well, that is part of the risk. There is no other possible way of regaining these letters. The unfortunate lady has not the money, and there are none of her people in whom she could confide. Tomorrow is the last day of grace, and unless we can get the letters tonight, this villain will be as good as his word and will bring about her ruin. Either I abandon my client to her fate, or I play this last card.
It's no choice.
Between ourselves, Watson, it's a sporting duel between this fellow Milverton and me. He had, as you saw, the best of the first exchanges. But my self-respect and my reputation are determined to fight to the finish.
I don't like it. But I suppose it must be. When do we start?
You are not coming.
Then you are not going. I give you my word of honor, and I never broke it in my life, that I will take a cab straight to the police station and tell them your plan unless you let me share this adventure with you.
You can't help me.
How do you know that? You can't tell what may happen. Anyway, my resolution is firm. Other people beside you have self-respect and even reputations.
Well, well, my dear fellow. Be it so. We have shared the same room for some years, and it would be amusing if it ended by sharing the same cell.
I don't know if I've mentioned it before, AC, but Sherlock's sense of humor does turn into some odd alleys.
I would really love a chance to interview him.
My apologies, AC, but Sherlock's schedule is too full for interviews. As this case proves, if you're not the man on the spot, you miss out on so much.
Well, how fortunate you are to be right there in the midst of the excitement.
Much more unpredictable than my war experiences, and more gratifying, as I feel I was, by assisting Sherlock, making a difference for good in the world. Although, as this case proves, sometimes you have to take an unorthodox, extra-legal approach to that assistance.
In other words, don't inform the police beforehand.
Oh, exactly, AC. Although, well, let's just listen to the tape.
You know, Watson, I don't mind confessing to you that I have always had an idea that I would have made a highly efficient criminal. This is the chance of my lifetime in that direction. See here. This is a first-class, up-to-date burgling kit with nickel-plated jemmy, diamond-tipped glass cutter, adaptable keys, and every modern improvement which the march of civilization demands. Here, too, is my dark lantern. Everything is in order. Have you a pair of silent shoes?
I have rubber-soled tennis shoes.
Excellent. And a mask?
I can make a couple out of silk.
I can see that you have a strong natural turn for this sort of thing. Very good. Make the masks. We shall have some cold supper before we start. It is now 9:30. At 11, we shall drive as far as Church Row. It is a quarter of an hour's walk from there to Appledore Towers. We shall be at work before midnight. Milverton is a heavy sleeper and retires punctually at 10:30. With any luck, we should be back here by 2 with the Lady Eva's letters in my pocket.
Holmes and I put on our dress clothes so that we might appear to be two theatre-goers homeward bound. In Oxford Street we picked up a hansom and drove to the Dress in Hampstead. Here we paid off our cab, and with our great coats buttoned up, for it was bitterly cold, and the wind seemed to blow through us, we walked along the edge of the heath.
Well, this is a real late-night thrill for our Twilight thrillers. Holmes and Watson against the wind and the law for the honor of an innocent young lady?
Almost poetic. Holmes had planned down to the minute. His nights with the housemaid giving him almost everything he needed. As I handed in the black silk mask, turning us into two of the most ferocious figures in London, as we strode up to a silent, gloomy house, all the inhabitants seemingly asleep.
This needs delicate treatment. These documents are contained in a safe in the fellow's study, and the study is in the anteroom of his bedchamber. On the other hand, like all these stout little men who do themselves well, he is an extravagant sleeper. Agatha, that's my fiancée, says it is a joke in the servants' hall that it's impossible to wake the master. He has a secretary who's devoted to his interests and never budges from the study all day. That's why we are going at night.
A reason for everything.
Of course. He also has a beast of a dog which roams the garden. I met Agatha late the last 2 evenings, and she locks the brute up so as to give me a clear run. This is the house, this big one in its own grounds. Through the gate. Now to the right, among the laurels. We might put our masks on here, I think. You see, there's not a glimmer of light in any of the windows, and everything is working splendidly. There, that's his bedroom. This door opens straight into the study. It would suit us best, but it is bolted as well as locked, and we should make too much noise getting in. Come round here. There's a greenhouse, which opens into the drawing room.
So, I followed Holmes into peril for both body and soul.
And now would be a cruel time for an ad break. I know, thrillers, but here's information about teas that can help with that sort of anxiety. And we're back. So, Watson, how were Holmes's burglary skills?
Well, AC, I had never broken into anything more complicated than the quartermaster's whiskey stash, but I watched in awe as Holmes moved with full confidence to execute his plan. The greenhouse was locked, but Holmes removed a circle of glass and turned the key from the inside. An instant afterwards he had closed the door behind us, and we had become felons in the eyes of the law. The thick, warm air of the conservatory and the rich, choking fragrance of exotic plants took us by the throat. He seized my hand in the darkness and led me swiftly past banks of shrubs which brushed against our faces. Holmes had remarkable powers, carefully cultivated, of seeing in the dark. Still holding my hand in one of his, he opened a door, and I was vaguely conscious that we had entered a large room in which a cigar had been smoked not long before. He felt his way among the furniture, opened another door, and closed it behind us. Putting out my hand, I felt several coats hanging from the wall, and I understood that I was in a passage. We passed along it, and Holmes very gently opened a door on the right-hand side. Something rushed out at us, and my heart sprang into my mouth. But I could have laughed when I realized that it was the cat.
Well, someone forgot to lock up the real danger.
Not a danger, just a surprise. In this new room, a fire was burning, and again the air was heavy with tobacco smoke. Holmes entered on tiptoe, waited for me to follow, and then very gently closed the door. We were in Milverton's study, and a portiere at the farther side showed the entrance to his bedroom. It was good fire, and the room was illuminated by it. Near the door I saw a gleam of an electric switch, but it was unnecessary. Even it had been safe to turn it on. At one side of the fireplace was a heavy curtain, which covered the bay window we had seen from the outside. On the other side was the door to the veranda. A desk stood in the centre, with a chair of shining red leather. Opposite was a large bookcase, with a marble bust of Athena on the top. In the corner, between the bookcase and the wall, there stood a tall green safe, the firelight flashing back and forth on the polished brass knobs upon his face. Holmes stole across and looked at it. Then he crept to the door of the bedroom and stood with a slanting head, listening intently. No sound came from within. Meanwhile, it had struck me that it would be wise to secure our retreat through the outer door, so I examined it. To my amazement, it was neither locked nor bolted. I touched Holmes on the arm, and he turned his masked face in that direction. I saw him start, and he was evidently as surprised as I.
A glitch in the plan?
Certainly an unexpected element. Sherlock was very unhappy. He didn't understand why the door was unlocked, but we had very little time. So he ordered me to stand by the door and bolt it if anyone came in, and we would escape the way we came. Otherwise, we would have to go through the door if we had to finish our task, or hide away behind the heavy window curtains. I had my task, AC. My first feeling of fear had passed away, and I thrilled now with a keener sense than I had ever enjoyed when we were the defenders of the law instead of its defilers. The high object of our mission, the consciousness that it was unselfish and chivalrous, the villainous character of our opponent, all added to the sporting interest of the adventure. Far from feeling guilty, I rejoiced and exulted in our dangers. With a glow of admiration, I watched Holmes unrolling his case of instruments and choosing his tool with the calm, scientific accuracy of a surgeon who performs a delicate operation. I knew that the opening of safes was a particular hobby with him, and I understood the joy which it gave him to be confronted with this green and gold monster, the dragon which held in its maw the reputations of many fair ladies. Turning up the cuffs of his dress coat, he had placed his overcoat on a chair. Holmes laid out 2 drills, a jemmy, and several skeleton keys.
Well, you paint a very vivid picture, John.
I stood ready for any emergency, though my plans were vague as to what to do if we were interrupted. For half an hour, Holmes worked with concentrated energy, laying down one tool, picking up another, handling each with the strength and delicacy of the trained mechanic. Finally, I heard a click. The broad green door swung open, and inside I had a glimpse of a number of paper packets, each tied, sealed, and inscribed. Holmes picked one out, but it was hard to read by the flickering fire, and he drew out his little dark lantern, for it was too dangerous with Milverton in the next room, to switch on the electric light. Suddenly I saw him halt, listen intently, and then in an instant he had swung the door to the safe to, picked up his coat, stuffed his tools in his pockets, and darted behind the window curtain, motioning me to do the same. It was only when I had joined him there that I heard what had alarmed his quicker senses. There was a noise somewhere within the house.
The cat again.
A door slammed in the distance.
Oh, so not the cat.
Indeed, not the cat. Then a confused, dull murmur broke itself into the measured thud of heavy footsteps, rapidly approaching. They were in the passage outside the room. They paused at the door. The door opened. There was a sharp snick as the electric light was turned on. The door closed once more, and the pungent reek of a strong cigar was borne to our nostrils. Then the footsteps continued backwards and forwards within a few yards of us. Finally, there was a creak from a chair, and the footsteps ceased. Then a key clicked in a lock, and I heard the rustle of papers. So far, I had not dared to look out, but now I gently parted the division of the curtains in front of me and peeped through. From the pressure of Holmes's shoulder against mine, I knew that he was sharing my observations. Right in front of us, and almost within our reach, was the broad, rounded back of Milverton. It was evident that we had entirely miscalculated his movements, that he had never been to his bedroom, but that he had been sitting up in some smoking or billiard room in the farther wing of the house, the windows of which we had not seen. His broad, grizzled head, with its shining patch of baldness, was in the immediate foreground of our vision. He was leaning far back in the red leather chair, his legs outstretched, a long black cigar projected at an angle from his mouth. He wore a semi-military smoking jacket, claret-coloured, with a black velvet collar. In his hand he held a long legal document, which he was reading in an indolent fashion, blowing rings of tobacco smoke from his lips as he did so. There was no promise of a speedy departure in his composed bearing and his comfortable attitude.
Well, didn't that throw you off?
I felt Holmes's hand steal into mine and give me a reassuring shake, as if to say that the situation was within his powers, and that he was easy in his mind. I was not sure whether he had seen what was only too obvious from my position, that the door of the safe was imperfectly closed, and that Milverton might at any moment observe it. In my own mind I had determined that if I was sure from the rigidity of his gaze that it had caught his eye, I would once spring out, throw my great coat over his head, pinion him, and leave the rest to Holmes. But Milverton never looked up. He was languidly interested in the papers in his hand, and page after page was turned as he followed the argument of the lawyer. At least, I thought, when he had finished the document and the cigar, he will go into his room. But before he had reached the end of either there came a remarkable development which turned our thoughts into quite another channel.
This was not the remarkable part.
Several times I had observed that Milverton looked at his watch, and once he had risen and sat down again, with a gesture of impatience. The idea, however, that he might have had an appointment at so strange an hour never occurred to me until a faint sound reached my ears from the veranda outside. Milverton dropped his papers and sat rigid in his chair. The sound was repeated, And then there came a gentle tap at the door. Milverton rose and opened it.
Well, okay, who was there? Because I am nearly as impatient as your villain.
You would not want to hurry to his end.
Well, you are nearly half an hour late.
Just as I could.
Ah, you've made me lose a good night's rest, my dear. I hope you'll prove worth it. You couldn't come any other time, eh?
No.
Well, if you couldn't, you couldn't. If the Countess is a hard mistress, you have your chance to be level with her now. Bless the girl, what are you shaking about? Well, that's right. Pull yourself together. Now, let us get down to business. You say that you have 5 letters which compromise the Countess d'Albert. You want to sell them, I want to buy them. So far, oh my God, is it you?
It is I, the woman whose life you have ruined.
Oh my, you were so very obstinate. Why did you drive me to such extremities? I assure you I wouldn't hurt a fly of my own accord. But every man has his business, and what was I to do? I put the price well within your means. You would not pay.
So you sent the letters to my husband, and he, the noblest gentleman that ever lived, a man whose boots I was never worthy to lace. He broke his gallant heart and died. You remember that last night when I came through that last door? I begged and prayed you for mercy. And you laughed in my face. As you are trying to do now, only your coward heart cannot keep your lips from twitching. Yes, you never thought to see me here again, but it was that night which taught me how I could meet you face to face and alone. So, Charles Milverton, what have you to say?
Don't imagine that you can bully me. I have only to raise my voice and could call my servants and have you arrested. But I will make allowance for your natural anger. Leave the room at once as you came, and I will say no more.
You will ruin no more lives as you ruined mine. You will wring no more hearts like you wrung mine. I will free the world of a poisonous thing. Take that. And that. And that. And that.
Wow, rewards reaped.
No interference on our part could have saved the man from his fate. But as the woman poured bullet after bullet into Milverton's shrinking body, I was about to spring out when I felt Holmes's cold, strong grasp upon my wrist. I understood that the whole argument that we had our own duties and our own objects which are not to be lost sight of. That was no affair of ours. That justice had overtaken a villain. But hardly had the woman rushed from the room when Holmes, with swift, silent steps, was over at the other door. He turned the key in the lock. At the same instant we heard voices in the house and a sound of hurrying feet. The revolver shots had roused the household. With perfect coolness, Holmes slipped across the safe, filled his 2 arms with bundles of letters, and poured them all into the fire. Again and again he did it, until the safe was empty. Someone turned the handle and beat upon the outside of the door. Holmes looked swiftly around. The letter which had been the messenger of death for Milverton lay, all mottled with his blood, upon the table. Holmes tossed it in among the blazing papers. Then he drew the key from the outer door, passed through after me, and then locked it from the outside. I could not have believed that an alarm could have spread so swiftly. Looking back, the huge house was one blaze of light. The front door was open, and figures were rushing down the drive. The whole garden was alive with people, and one fellow raised a ruckus as we emerged from the veranda and followed hard at our heels. Holmes seemed to know the ground perfectly, and he threaded his way swiftly among the plantation of small trees, I close at his heels, and our foremost pursuer panting behind us. It was a 6-foot wall that barred our path, but he sprang to the top and over. As I did the same, I felt the hand of the man grab me by ankle, but I kicked myself free and scrambled over a grass-strewn coping. I fell upon my face at some bushes, but Holmes had me on my feet in an instant, and together we dashed away across the huge expanse of Hampstead Heath. We had run 2 miles, I suppose, before Holmes at last halted and listened intently. All was absolute silence behind us. We had shaken off our pursuers and were safe.
So, how could you go and sleep after all that?
Like a man exhausted. It was good that I had at least a few hours of shut-eyes. The next morning we were received an unexpected visitor.
Oh no, was it the lady or wait, Milverton was definitely dead, right?
Irrefutably. No, it was Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard.
Good morning, Mr. Holmes. Good morning. May I ask if you're busy just now?
Not too busy to listen to you.
I thought perhaps if you had nothing particular on hand, you might care to assist us in a most remarkable case which only occurred just last night in Hampstead.
Dear me, what was that?
A murder. A most dramatic and remarkable murder. I know how keen you are upon these things, and I would take it as a grand favour if you would step down to Appledore Towers and give us the benefit of your advice. 'Tis no ordinary crime. We have had our eyes upon this Mr. Milverton for some time, and between ourselves, he was a bit of a villain. He is known to have held papers which he used for blackmailing purposes. These papers have all been burnt by the murderers. No article of value was taken, as it is probable that the criminals were men of good position whose sole object was to prevent social exposure.
Criminals, plural.
Yes, there were 2 of them. They were, as nearly as possible, captured red-handed. We have their footmarks, their description. It's 10 to 1 that we trace them. The first fellow was a bit too active, but the second was caught by the under-gardener and only got away after a struggle. He was a tall, wiry man, sharp-jawed, moustache, mask over his eyes.
It's rather vague. Why, it might be a description of Watson.
It's true. It might be a description of Watson.
Well, I'm afraid I can't help you, Lestrade. The fact is that I knew this fellow Milverton, that I considered him one of the most dangerous men in London, that I think there are certain crimes which the law cannot touch, and which therefore, to some extent, justify private revenge.
But, Mr. Holmes,
No, it's no use arguing. I have made up my mind. My sympathies are with the criminals rather than with the victim, and I will not handle this case.
Well, when Lestrade listens to this episode, you're going to be outed as burglars. Could have been Watson.
You and I both know Lestrade has sworn not to listen to your podcast or anything about it.
Well, yes, he's been very forward about wanting to be a guest, but his most interesting cases have already been discussed by you, like this one. My thrillers deserve the insider view, complete with all the details, and, well, Lestrade has always struck me as something of an outsider.
An unobservant one, if you ask Sherlock. Of course, if you ask Sherlock, we all are.
Well, I'd like to someday, but right now, my thrillers want to know, was that the end of it?
Until lunch that day, Sherlock had been in a distant, abstracted mood. But in the middle of lunch, he suddenly sprang to his feet and dragged me to Regent Circus, to a shop window filled with photos of celebrities and beauties of the day. Holmes' eyes fixed themselves upon one of them, and following his gaze, I saw the picture of a regal and stately woman in court dress, with a high diamond tiara upon her noble head. I looked at that delicately curved nose, at the marked eyebrows and the straight mouth and the strong little chin beneath it. Then I caught my breath as I read the time-honored title of the great nobleman and statesman whose wife she had been. My eyes met those of Holmes, and he put his finger to his lips as we turned away from the window.
A secret. Even non-clients must appreciate your discretion.
Your thrillers would probably love some more indiscriminate details.
You share quite enough, John. Very thrilling. I'm not sure my heart could take much more. When those shots,
I imagine being in the same room and told not to move.
So you make it very easy to imagine. You bring the adventures of Sherlock Holmes to life for us. My listeners are incredibly grateful for the tales you tell.
It's my pleasure, AC.
Well, next week, thrillers, after this breaking and entering episode, we'll be talking to Augustus Dupin about a murder spree in Paris.
Bonne chance. Give Monsieur Dupin my regards.
And once again, thank you to Dr. John Watson, ever the gentleman, for being our guest.
Much thanks to you and the thrillers, AC. You know I love our chats.
And we'll be scheduling your next visit before you leave. Well, that concludes another episode of Twilight Thriller Radio with one of our favorite guests, Dr. John Watson, half of the chivalrous crime-solving duo, Holmes and Watson. Let us know what you thought of tonight's adventure in the comments, and don't forget to top off that tea. Hi, everyone. I'm Joan. I played podcast host AC Doyle.
Hello. My name is Laura Kate Marshall, and I was glad to join you as Dr. John Watson.
I'm Hilary Appleman, playing Sherlock Holmes.
Priscilla McFerrin, I played the dastardly Milverton.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Schwartz, and I played the woman who purged the villain. I hope you enjoyed the murder as I enjoyed doing it. Thank you for coming.
I'm Jasmine Graham, and I had the pleasure of playing Inspector Lestrade.
Ash, I was the stage manager for Sherlock Holmes. I'm Michelle. I'm the adapter and director. Thank you for watching our show. Mad applause off screen for this excellent cast, right? Thank you all.
Hi, thanks for watching the third installment of our Sherlock Holmes: The Adventures of as a Contemporary Crime podcast. I've been loving adapting them, so I'm very glad Joan Concilio came up with this framework. You can watch another stage reading version of an earlier one that we did right on our YouTube channel. It's just look for The Adventure of the Devil's Claw. Upcoming, if you're local, we have Christmas Caroling coming up on December 23rd. And we will also be having virtual, via Zoom, auditions for Pygmalion, our winter comedy, which will once again be done via Zoom and open to actors from anywhere, actually, as long as you can come and join us via the internet. This is how I do my winter comedies now, and I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you for watching. The radio play version with all the snazzy sound effects will be up in a week or two. So go to subscribe on Spotify. We have a bunch of radio plays there. So listen, including a Christmas Carol. We're very seasonal. And a Christmas Sherlock episode, The Case of the Blue Carbuncle. Yeah, that's fun. There is Christmas singing. Watson sings. You want to listen. Alrighty. Well, so check out all our social media. Subscribe here and on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And we will talk to you soon. Thanks.
Upstart Arts is an all-volunteer theatrical collective. Please support us by telling your friends about these radio plays and keeping an eye on our social media for our next adventure. Thank you for listening.